Be me, Laura. 28. I work in social media marketing, and I'd like to think I'm pretty aware of the world. I'm a feminist. Not the 90s kind, but the kind that understands systemic power structures. My whole life, I've been told that marriage is a partnership, a beautiful union. I see it for what it is. The oldest patriarchal institution, designed to benefit men while extracting unpaid labor from women. My friends complain about their boyfriends and husbands, but they don't see the big picture. They think their problems are individual, not systemic. I decided I needed to do more than just tweet about it. I needed to document it from the inside, a kind of field study, you could say. My subject, Mark. My husband of 2 years. He's the perfect specimen, 32, a software engineer. He's what society calls a good guy, which is exactly how the system works. It masks privilege with politeness. When we met, he already had his own apartment, bought it himself a few years before we even knew each other. He had a decent car, a stable career path, and savings. People would say he was responsible. I saw a man who got a head start from a system built for him. My mission was clear: live my life, but keep a record. Note down every single instance where the institution of marriage served him, propped him up, and left me carrying the invisible load. I was ready to prove my thesis. The project began on a quiet Tuesday evening, I think. It was a few months ago. We both got home from work around the same time. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and felt the day's stress weighing on me. He did the same, but then he drifted over to the couch and picked up a video game controller. He said he just needed 30 minutes to decompress from a stressful day of coding. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the empty fridge, the first piece of data for my log. We both had stressful days. We were both tired. But society had granted him a decompression period, while I was immediately faced with the mental load of what we were going to eat for dinner. He wasn't malicious. That's the insidious part. He just didn't see it. He was a fish swimming in patriarchal water. He didn't know he was wet. I ended up ordering takeout. When he asked what I wanted, I just told him to decide. He happily ordered pizza. I made a mental note. He was even outsourcing the labor of choosing a meal to me, under the guise of being considerate. A week or so later, we hit the topic of finances. This was always a big one for me. Mark earns a fair bit more than I do. It's the wage gap in action, right in my own home. He's always been the one to pay the mortgage on his apartment. He handles the utilities, the internet, the car insurance. He calls it covering the big stuff. I usually handle groceries, household supplies, planning our dates, buying gifts for his family. On paper, it looks like he's contributing more. But I see the truth. He's paying for his own assets. His mortgage is building his equity. His car is in his name. My financial contributions are ephemeral. They get used up, eaten, or thrown away. I'm pouring my money into the day-to-day maintenance of his life. That evening, he came to me with an idea. He suggested we open a joint savings account. He said we could both put a percentage of our paychecks into it for future goals, like a big vacation or maybe a down payment on a bigger place one day. It was presented as a smart, collaborative financial move. I saw it as a trap. It was a way to absorb my income into his financial sphere, a way to get me to start contributing to his assets directly. I told him I needed to keep my finances separate for my own sense of independence. He looked a little confused, maybe even hurt. He said something like, "Okay, I just thought it would be a good way for us to work together." He dropped it. But I knew what I had just avoided. It was a classic move to create financial dependency. I texted my friend Jessica about it later. She's on the same wavelength as me. Her reply came back almost instantly. "Total red flag. He's trying to control you." I knew it. The emotional labor became the most frequent entry in my notes. It's the kind of work no one sees. It was my job to remember his mother's birthday and buy a card. It was my job to notice we were low on paper towels. It was my job to schedule our dentist appointments. One Saturday, I asked him to take out the trash and recycling. He said, "Sure, in a minute," and went back to reading something on his phone. An hour later, it was still there. I had to ask him again. He did it immediately, with a quick apology. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I had to expend mental energy, not only to identify the task, but also to manage him to completion. I was his project manager, an unpaid one. Later that day, he cleaned the entire kitchen without me asking. He scrubbed the counters, mopped the floor, everything. He looked so proud of himself, like he deserved a medal. He said he wanted to do his part. I thanked him, of course, but what I saw was a man who performed a visible, praiseworthy task once a month, while my daily, invisible work went completely unnoticed. His contribution was an event. Mine was the atmosphere. We had some of his friends over for a game night. This was a goldmine of observations. The conversation naturally flowed to their work. They were all in tech. They talked about programming languages, new hardware, and problems at their jobs. Mark was in his element. He was treated as an expert, an authority. Someone asked me what I did. I told them I was a social media marketing manager. They just nodded. "Oh, cool. So you do, like, Instagram for companies?" My complex job, which involves strategy, analytics, and content creation, was reduced to doing Instagram. No one asked any follow-up questions. The conversation immediately went back to tech. I felt like an accessory in my own home. I was Mark's wife, a supporting character in his story. Later, one of his friends, the loud one, the one who always felt like a walking stereotype of toxic masculinity, saw Mark loading the dishwasher. He laughed and said, "Dude, she's got you so well trained." Mark just rolled his eyes and laughed it off. But I didn't. I heard the subtext. Domestic work is women's work. A man doing it is a sign of weakness, of being trained. The entire social structure was present in that one stupid joke, and my husband was complicit in it through his silence. The vacation incident was a big one. It felt like a turning point. I'd been feeling burnt out for a while. Juggling my job and the unacknowledged second shift at home was exhausting. I mentioned I wanted to go somewhere, maybe to a beach resort, just to lie down and do nothing for a week. Mark saw how tired I was. He was sweet about it, telling me I deserved a break. About 2 weeks later, he came home with a huge smile on his face. He told me to pack my bags. He had a surprise for me. He'd booked a week-long trip for us, a beautiful rustic cabin in the mountains. He had planned everything: hikes, a nice dinner at a lodge, even a little town to explore. He was so excited. He thought he'd done this amazing romantic thing, and all I could feel was a cold wave of resentment. I had specifically mentioned a beach, a place to rest. He had planned an active, hiking-focused trip to the mountains, his ideal vacation. He hadn't asked me. He hadn't collaborated with me. He had made a unilateral decision about my time, my energy, and my relaxation. This wasn't a gift. It was an act of control. It was him demonstrating that he was the one who made the big decisions in our lives. I put on a smile and told him it was wonderful. What else could I do? The whole week in the mountains, I felt like I was playing a part. I'd pose for pictures with the scenic backdrop, all while documenting my feelings in the Notes app on my phone. He thought we were creating memories. I was gathering evidence. When we got back, I described the situation to Jessica. She told me it was a classic example of benevolent sexism. He was treating me like a child who needed to be surprised and managed, not like an equal partner. She was right. The months went on like this. My logbook of grievances grew longer and more detailed. The way he would just assume I would be the one to stay home for a furniture delivery. The way he'd call his car my baby, but never once offered to clean the bathroom. The way he'd fall asleep on the couch, leaving me to turn off all the lights and lock the doors, like a night watchman in my own home. Each instance on its own seemed small, trivial even, but woven together, they created a tapestry of systemic inequality. Mark was not a bad man. He was a product of a system that had coddled him, centered him, and taught him to be oblivious to his own privilege. My resentment was calcifying. It was becoming a hard, solid thing inside my chest. He could feel the distance between us. I knew he could. Sometimes he'd ask me if I was okay, if something was wrong. "I'm just tired," I'd say. It wasn't a lie, I was tired. Tired of everything. The breaking point came in the fall. It was a Thursday. Mark came home from work, radiating excitement. He practically bounced through the door. He told me he'd gotten it, the promotion he'd been working towards for over a year. It came with a huge raise, a new title, more responsibility. He picked me up and spun me around. He was ecstatic. He started talking about the future. "Now we can really start saving," he said. "This changes everything." I felt nothing, just a cold, clinical clarity. I saw exactly what this meant. More responsibility for him at work meant less availability from him at home. A bigger salary for him meant an even wider financial gap between us, increasing his power and my dependency. He saw this as a victory for us. I saw it as the final brick in the wall of my patriarchal prison. He was celebrating a promotion that would be built on the back of my increased unpaid labor. He was talking about a fancy dinner to celebrate. I stood there, looking at this happy, clueless man, and I knew my research was complete. "I can't do this anymore, Mark," I said. The smile vanished from his face. He put me down slowly. "Do what? What are you talking about?" He had no idea. Of course he didn't. He had never seen the bars of the cage. He just stood there in the middle of the living room, completely baffled. "Can't do what, Laura? Celebrate my promotion? I don't understand." The naivety was almost stunning. It was like trying to explain color to someone born blind. "This," I said, making a vague gesture to the apartment, to us. "This arrangement, this entire system, it's not working for me." I tried to explain it. I used the terms I had been documenting for months: emotional labor, the mental load, the invisible second shift. I told him how I felt like a manager in my own home, how his career was being built on a foundation of my free work. He just kept shaking his head, a look of genuine hurt and confusion on his face. "I thought we were a team," he said. "I do things around the house. I cook sometimes. I do the dishes." He started listing tasks.
난 근데 오리지널로 먹는 게 제일 맛있다. 그래서 육즙을 가두기 위해서 포장을 하면 바로 먹는 거 아니면은 90%만 익혀준대. 그래서 먹을 때 전자레인지에 데펴서 먹으래, 1분. 바로 먹을 사람들은 얘기하고. 너무 맛있어. 야, 내 개인 기준 담양 떡갈비보다 맛있다. 담양 떡갈비보다 훨씬 맛있어. 많이 걸어서 그 정도까지 찌지 않더라도 나 요즘 살찌도 55kg던데? 나 밥 다 먹고 몸무게 서 55kg야. 옛날에 나 복귀했을 때 58kg였는데. 진짜 맛있다. 조준기 썼어요. 그러니까 이게 실제로 보면은 뚱뚱하다 이런 느낌이 아니야. 근데 카메라에는 뚱뚱하다 이런 느낌이긴 해. 맛있어. 개 맛있어. 진짜. 여러분들이 보고 계시는 그 역캠분들을 실제로 보면은 그냥 있잖아. 그냥 진짜 왕창 말랐어. 그냥 빼빼로. 응, 진짜로. 사장님이 잘생긴 거랑 맛을 느끼는 거랑 뭔 상관이야? 뭔 소리야? 진짜 너무 맛있게 잘 먹었습니다.
네,
감사합니다. 안녕히 계세요. 감사합니다. 네, 좋은 하루 되세요. 맛있다. 여행 다녀요. 야, 앙치 일로 와. 야, 500개. 야, 일로 와. 500개. 아, 니 그때 호떡 먹어주면 오늘 500개 입금한다며. 말을 바꿔? 진짜 딱 말한다. 1분 준다. 빨리 충전해서 와라. 진짜 딱 1분 준다. 어? 언제 들어오? 진짜 넉넉하게 7시까지 준다. 알겠어? 진짜 넉넉하게 7시다.
양치요정마리님 1개월 구독 감사합니다. 아니,
뭐? 뭐? 그래서 화장실이 지정 화장실 아니고서는 화장실에 물이 안 나와. 그래, 너무 가는데 너 오버하지 마. 7시까지다. 알겠어? 음. 하긴 나도 삥 뜯으면 삥 뜯을 수 있어. 내가 착하게 대해주니까 만만해 보여? 아, 목 맥힌다. 뭐 목말라. 사장님, 슬러시 돼요? 콜라랑 파파야랑 섞어야겠다. 3,000원?
마이너스 4천. 일단 할부할 수도 있음 친구비 상납.
진짜 뒤질래? 할부가 되겠냐고. 안 되지. 야, 이거는 플러스 마이너스가 같이 있는 거고 500개는 플러스만 있는 룰렛인데 그럼 300개를 돌렸었어야지. 니 지금 마이너스 4,000원이나 깠어. 말이야? 말이냐고. 사장님, 저 파파야랑 콜라 섞어서. 감사합니다. 콜라 조금 더 많이 주세요. 감사합니다.
진짜 많이 얇다.
네, 맞아요. 부산. 감사합니다. 좋은 하루 되세요. 오, 맛있어, 맛있어. 양치야, 너 조금 있다가 500개다. 알겠어? 알겠어, 몰랐어.